Hello everybody and welcome to Monster Hobbies Tabletop Adventures. My name is Trevor and I'm the owner of Monster Hobbies, and I'm coming to you live from, or pre-recorded maybe, from our new Monster Hobbies game room. This is a really cool area in the back of our store where we have a wargaming table right down here and all this awesome terrain. So, Games Workshop has recently released Warhammer Fantasy in the Warhammer Old World book. And what I want to do is go back in time to 1988 and build some of the original Warhammer Townscape buildings, which were printed off on cardboard. And I'm going to make them for our wargaming room back here because they're pretty cool. Now you can find that PDF online, print it out onto good cardstock like I've done, and then start the building adventure. So without further ado, let's go down to the bench and I'm going to build building number 1 out of the Warhammer terrain, and in future videos I will build the other buildings, one building at a time per video. So let's check this out. Now the buildings I'm going to build for our next series of videos are from Warhammer Townscape. This was a cardboard cutout paper set that came out in 1988 so that you could build some simple buildings and play games of Warhammer with your figures using the buildings as scenery. Now of course in modern times Games Workshop has re-released a lot of the old plastic kits, but Townscapes was before that. It is really unique, and the nice part is you can print these PDFs off from your computer if you can find them out on the internet. Now the first building that we're going to build in this series is the Farmhouse, and it says the farmhouse consists of 4 separate box sections glued together. Assemble each section as normal and glue the completed pieces together to make the farmhouse. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use foamcore because on the images, they suggest cutting them and folding paper tabs in and that sort of thing, but I found that that doesn't really give it the strength it needs in order to survive. Usually gluing it together that way makes everything quite flimsy, so when you pick it up you have a tendency to crush the model. So I'm going to show you my technique on building these buildings, and like I said, we're going to start with that farmhouse. Here we have the first 2 pages of our Warhammer Townscape book, and of course page 1 and page 2. So building number 1 is all labeled with these little ones that are sticking out on each of the images. And then building 2, which is going to be next week, is right here. So we want to just cut out the basic building for building number 1. And as you can see, there are some extra pieces like spare doors in here and little shields and emblems. We can always cut those out and put them in a little Ziploc bag for later, or you could use them and glue them onto your house as we go along. It's all up to you. Now, normally on these Warhammer Townscape buildings, the original set would have had these buildings die cut, which means that after the image was printed, there'd be a press die that would come down and perforate the edges along here, and that would make it so that when you had the book, you could easily pop these off the page. Now, since this is a printed off PDF, what I like to use is a hobby knife, usually a number 11 blade, and a clear ruler, and that is so that I can put the image up to the edge and then cut it out or score it. But the other thing that I want to use is pieces of foam core like this. Usually I get my foam core board from the dollar store where you can pick up big sheets like this for as much as $2, but mostly about $1.50, something like that. And here you can see what it is, basically a piece of styrofoam that's really thin in the middle with paper glued on either side. And what I like to do is glue the image down onto the foam core, much like that. Of course, a bigger piece of foam core, right? And then once that's dry, cut it out using the ruler as a straight edge and the knife. These are the tools that I like to use in order to build these papercraft buildings. So we have a hot glue gun with glue sticks. We've got Elmer's glue, white glue. You can also use glue sticks. I have two different knives, a number 11 blade and a number 16. I also have a right angle triangle from a protractor set. This represents the foam core board. We've got our clear ruler. This represents cardboard. You can also use things like old thin pizza boxes and that kind of deal. And then a nice hardwood surface in order to cut these things out on. Always take care when using your hot glue gun because it can be very, very hot. Now to start off with, I'm going to cut out this top image, and I will grab my ruler here. So I'm going to carefully just line up the edge of the image with the ruler and the knife, like so. Hold it down and just cut through, just like this. Gives it a nice edge there. I'm going to do the same over here. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut these tabs off. Now, normally you would fold these tabs over, score them, fold them over, but I'm going to use that foam core board, and the thickness of the tab is the same thickness as the foam core board, so that makes it quite easy to use. So we'll just cut this out here. And the nice part about having this on a PDF is if I make a mistake and cut something wrong, I can always easily print off another image. So what I have here is an image on our cutting board, and now you can see that those red flaps have all been cut off. You'll also notice that there is a line right here that runs straight up this pillar and kind of meets at the edge of this roof. What I want to do is cut the image apart so that this is one section and this is another section. So I'm going to just line the ruler up with this edge right there and right about there. And then I'm going to cut them apart. And there we go. Here we have the 5 images that are going to make up that first building of our 3 building set for the farmhouse. And you'll notice that I've cut out the roof, but I haven't cut the roof in half down the center. And there's a reason for that. The reason is that I'm going to glue it onto our boxboard, and then I will score the center once the glue is dried. I'll score it up the center and then fold it, and that will give the roof a bit more rigidity. But these pieces here I'm going to glue onto the foam board, and then I'm going to make another cardboard base for these, and I'll glue the pieces onto the base, as you're going to see in a minute. So when I'm going to glue the images, I like to use just a scrap piece of paper and another little piece rip off, and this is going to be to spread the glue. So what I'll do is I'll turn the image over and just take my glue and glue a little around here, like so. Just move this up a bit. And then take the other paper as a spreader, and from the center spread outward so that the whole back of this paper of our image gets glue all over it. Then I'll take it off, move that out of the way. Here I've got black foam core, and I'll just take the image and line it up with an edge. Now here you can see I've already got the corner there on that one. So we'll just go on the flat here, lay this down like that. And then another nice part of the triangle is that you can use it as a squeegee, and starting in the center, just push outward like this with some pressure on the top, and that'll allow the image to get down flat onto this foam core board, as well as push the glue out if there's any extras off the edges. And always make sure you're going out here and try not to get any glue on the outside of the image. So what we'll do after this is we will use our knife and our ruler and just go on the edges and cut the building pieces out. Now I haven't glued these sides on yet, and there's a reason for that. There's actually 2 ways to do this. One is to glue them down, and then after you cut the images out, you would take the foam core on its edge like so, and then cut a 45-degree angle off, like all the way down. And that gives you a beveled edge so that these corners go together, whoops, beveled like that. The other way is to cut these out and then measure the distance here and subtract the edge from there with a ruler on both sides and make a smaller wall. So one that would come here on the edges and there, and then glue your foam core together end to end. So that's the other way that I can do this. So for our roof panel, I'm going to glue it onto this cardboard here from a pizza box. And what I want to do is have the underside of the roof be this texture of the cardboard on the inside, because this sort of looks like maybe OSB board or something to that effect. Now, I kind of doubt they would have OSB board in the medieval times, but it does look a lot more like wood than the printed side. So what I'll do is I'll glue the roof onto the printed side and then cut this out, and when I turn the roof over, we'll have the brown wood side. Now here's our roof that has been glued onto that cardboard. So there's the wood color on the downside. I've also scored it right across that center line. So now I can fold this in half, just like so. And can take the triangle here and just carefully rub it along this edge, and that will compress down the cardboard on itself and give you a tighter fold along that seam. So I'm just going to take this roof now, like so, and set it off to the side until we're ready to glue the roof on the building. Here we have our building ends cut out of the foam core. As you can see, it's still glued on the back. Now, I did have a rough edge here because I need new sharp knife blades. Sharp beats dull, but what I found is if you use some sandpaper on a block, you can actually clean up the edge of the foam core board and make it nice and smooth. What I want to do now is build a cardboard base for these wall sides to sit on. So first thing I'm going to do is take my ruler and I'm going to measure the edges here. So right there I get 5.5 centimeters, and on the longer walls I get about 7 centimeters. So what I'll do is I will transfer that onto a piece of cardboard, with one side being the 5.5 and the other being the 7. Here we have our cardboard on the cutting board, and I'm using my square right here. And I did forget to mention, bring a pen or a pencil, because you're going to have to make some marks. So we are going to start here with the 5.5 centimeters. So I'm going to make a mark at 5.5. I'll come over here somewhere. Make another mark at 5.5, about there. Then I'll take my long ruler over here, lay it down, and connect the lines, something like that. 5.5. So now we want to go 7 centimeters out there. And another 7 right there, and then we'll draw a line like so. And now I'll take my pieces here, and yeah, that measures out that way, and then the side measures out there. The side's a little bit longer, 7.1 I believe. But hopefully there should be enough room in order for this to work. You know, on second thought, when in doubt, always measure twice, cut once. So I'm not going to use this side here. I actually measured it and was 7.2 centimeters. So there's the longer edge, but here's the end caps. Now, one thing I realized about the roof, you want to make sure you cut out the right roof section for the building, And the one I cut out was not the right one for the building I'm using. It's actually this one. And the way to tell is I took the peak of the building along the fold line here and realized that it comes out just a little bit beyond the edge of the building on this roof here on page 2, whereas the roof on page 1 is for one of the other buildings, because here, as you see, it doesn't quite get to the edge of the building. Now it's time to assemble this portion of the building with our hot glue gun. So I've got this one with a little stand. I'm just going to pull the stand out of the way so I can get right in there. Now what I'm going to do is, I could turn this over, have the paper side on the bottom, but it doesn't really make a difference. Now what I'll do is run a little bead of hot glue along the bottom here, kick my stand out, put my glue gun over there. Always have a little pad of something underneath your glue gun because it will start leaking. So what I do is I just bring this as close to the edge as I can, and then I push the building edge to the edge of the cardboard, get it in position, and then push it down hard onto the cutting board until this starts to set up, and that'll get a nice tight bond between the base and the wall. Okay, that should be good. Then I'll do the same on this side. That hot glue, and be careful not to get your fingers on the hot glue. Okay, edge to edge. And push down. And there we go. So now you've got a structure like this. So in order to measure it in between here and here, I'm going to put my ruler down. Now I'm using metric because I figure this is set from England, so they're probably on the metric. So what I've got in between here and here in our center section is 6.1 centimeters. And the other thing I want to do is get this wall height the same. So just measure up this way, and we've got what looks like 4.5 centimeters. So now I've cut the side walls, and I did not glue the image on just yet because that'll come after. So what I'm going to do is take the hot glue gun. Well, first off, let's just test this for accuracy. So once it's all glued together, this should be nice and even. And that's what it looks like it's going to be. Both sides should fit in here, like so. And that's what's happening. So that's how this is going to go together. I think maybe the hot glue gun is ready. Yep. So what I'll do is make a bead up here, a bead along the bottom, and then one up the other side. Set that over there. And same technique, we'll try to bring this right up to the edges as best we can. Then I'm going to hold it all together like this, pinching downward, gets a pressure onto that bottom piece of cardboard. And sometimes it'll stick if a little bit squeezes out. This is where you can roll off the hot glue with your fingers. Hopefully it's not too hot when you do this. I've had that happen. So now I got it nice and flush there, and we'll just do the other side. Now my glue stick is running low, so I can just stick another one in the end here. There we go. And up this side. Okay, kick those legs down. Bring this into shape like so. Squish this down and in. And that should do it. So now we've got our sides, and then what I'll do, I've got to recheck the image on the internet, or with my PDFs, but I'll just glue the back of this, spread it out, and then stick it on here. Oh, make sure the stone matches the stone. So it'd be this way around. Squeegee it on and let that set for a bit. Here's the first building on our 3-part farmhouse. Now, I haven't glued the roof on just yet, but there's that cardboard underneath. And the reason is this farmhouse has the other 2 buildings hanging off of it. So we'll have to glue the 2 pieces of foam board walls together, and you can't really do that very well with the roof on. So that's why I'm leaving the roof off for now. Now what I'm going to do is build up the other 2 buildings the same way that I built this one, and then I'll get together with all 3 of them and show you how to glue them together. Now for our building with the red ends, I've used the beveled edge technique here. You can see the edges are angled. Same with on this piece. There they are. Now this actually makes it so that the edges are nice and flat and come up tight on the building once you get it all glued together. So that's the other technique, instead of having the square foam board and making the wall shorter on the inside. This way you can bring everything right out to the edges. Here we have the 4 separate buildings that make up the one farmhouse. So we have the narrow building on one end. We have the corridor building, which also has the big wide gate doors on it. Then we've got the little house portion. And finally a shed, or maybe an outhouse, I believe. And these will all go together like this, get glued, and then I can put the roofs on afterwards. Now, one thing that I noticed is that the image of the farmhouse does not exactly show if this is dead center in the middle or off to one side or whatever. So we're just going to have to use my imagination and try to get it together in the way that I think is the best. So from the picture, I'm going to glue this center house here to this one here on the end, and that would be these 2. So what I'll do is just put a little bit of the hot glue down here, like so. I'm going to center it in between here and here somewhere, just like that, and then pinch these together and put pressure downward so that the bottoms of the buildings line up nice and even as the sides will. And now these 2 are permanently fixed together and it's nice and smooth across the bottom. Then I'll do the same on here, and I'm going to glue in between the windows, actually pretty much lining up the edge with these 2 lines here and here. So let's get that together. Do the same thing. I'll put glue here onto the edge of the red box, but not up into the roof angle. Okay. Now careful to align right about there. So down and together for a little bit here. Should probably do. Okay, that's looking good. And this is flat, a little bit of a gap in between. That's okay. And then we get our little end building, and I think it should go again between the 2 beams, sort of like that. So I had to make a back wall up here because this only had 3 sides. So here we go. Here we go, here we go. It's like an orc. Okay, now push together and down. Okay, there we have the farmhouse all together as one complete unit. Looking really nice. Now the next step is to add on the roof sections, but this one here, there's a bit of a mistake and we're going to have to cut a notch into the roof. So I'll show you that next. So what I have here is the red roof edge sticking up a little bit and then coming down into here on this roof panel. So you'll notice if I take the roof intended for here, I can't move it down beyond this bit here, and that leaves a big gap right into there. So what I need to do is figure out where the roof is going to be with the correct overhang. There's going to be a little bit of the roof overhanging off the edge there. So just sort of maneuver this into position. Then I'm going to take my pen and just mark where it is, where that angle comes into play. And what I think I'll try doing is getting my square here. Just gonna cut a little away here, like this. And then cut down where that met that, and this meets this. And I'm not really measuring here, I'm just going by feel. There we go. And that's getting quite a bit closer. Still got to go a little more, but I'll just cut back a little on the line and then it should fit perfectly. So now I've got this roof notched into the wall of the other building, and I also cut it at a bit of an angle off the edges here just to taper that in. So now this roof is sitting nice and flush, and when I put the other roof on for the cross building, you can now see that the two will work together as one piece. So from here I can now glue on these roof sections and finish up the building. So here we go with our hot glue gun. I'm just going to squeeze a bit on the edges here for the little shack part. Now you want to make sure that your shingles are facing the right way, which should be overlapping and moving down off the edge. So there is roof number one. And roof number two, we will go up here on the peaks. And make sure I don't go off the edge with the glue gun. I'm going to line this up here first. And push down on the edges and slide out like that. Get rid of some of these hot glue gun strings. Now for this one again, this is a little tricky up here. I'll just get a little glue under there, up on this edge, down the ridge, and then right here. I'll fit this one into shape. Should have started on this edge. Trying to push that wall into the ridge here. Okay, and the final roof for our narrow portion. Get this hot glue gun out of here. And put it on the roof peak, give a little overlap off the edge. Peel off any bits of it that are squeezing out. Okay, there it is. You can feel how warm that is coming through the cardboard. All right, so there we've got our farmhouse with the roof all on. Looking really nice. How about that, eh? So that will be good on our Warhammer table. And all we have left on page 1 after cutting out our farmhouse and building it is this shield, the sign of the sun, and a spare door. So we'll cut those out and put them to the side for future use. Well, I really hope you enjoyed that build of the Warhammer Townscape's farmhouse building. Tune in next week when we get to check out how I build the Warhammer Gatehouse, the next building in this entire paper collection. I sure hope you had fun and hopefully worked along with me in this video. And if you have any questions, please leave them down in the comments section below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with all your wargaming friends. Tell them to come on down to Monster Hobbies in High River, Alberta, Canada, and please come and play on our games room, Warhammer Fantasy Battles 40K, maybe even some of the other great games out there like World War II games. You name it, come on down and play it. And until next time, everybody, happy model building, and we'll see you in our next adventure.